Howdy folks, this is Cullen and this is Pagan 101. I'm going to break this into 3 separate videos simply to keep the file size down, and we'll work it from there. This first one, basically I'm going to cover what paganism is and is not. Probably the is not is more important for this one. But we'll get to that in a second. Besides this video, I have in a prior time written another set of missives, basically a Pagan 101. I sent these to Gwendolyn, so they're available for you to acquire. And if not from her, you can get them from me. It'll cover slightly different stuff than what this is doing. And enough of that. On to what paganism is. The term itself comes from a Latin term from the time of the Roman Empire. Basically what it referred to is the country folk. And the people in the cities, just like today, consider themselves to be smarter, more cosmopolitan, and just better than the hicks that are out there in the country. So it was basically a derogatory term, which, like I said, you can use the term, modern translation of hick, and it would apply. But it meant country folk. Nowadays, paganism more or less falls in the category of any path that does not fall into the 4 main monotheistic paths. And so it could be pretty much anything. Sometimes the term heathen is used. Some people like to use heathen rather than pagan. I put it in the same category as with Star Trek fans. Some want to be called Trekkers rather than Trekkies. It's all semantics. It's all the same thing. Use the term that fits for you, and be damned what anybody else thinks. The 4, you might think 3 branches of monotheism, but there is actually 4. The 3 main ones that you think of course, is Christianity, Islam, both of which splintered off from Judaism, or, well, in the hodgepodge of that time, at least Islam might have, it come about. It doesn't matter. They're all sucking up to the same big dude. Doesn't matter if you call him God, Yahweh, Allah, same guy. They're all fawning over him, and that's fine. Then there is the 4th branch of monotheism, and this is the one that we get confused with on a regular basis, and that is the Satanists. No way, shape, or form is paganism part of Satanism. It's real simple. Satan, Lucifer, whatever word you want to use for him, the devil, that is the big guy's tantrum-throwing angel that didn't want to play by the rules that he set. So you can't have the devil without having the God, that he split off from. They're a package deal. It's as simple as that. If we don't suck up to, the monotheistic God, why in the world would we want to go and deal with one of his misbehaving angels? Leave it where it's at. Don't bring it into it. That ain't us. If somebody wants to say it, pat them on the head, say, well, you're cute, but you're wrong. there's some other things about paganism when starting out. And I've run into this on occasion. And that is, treat it with respect. It's not a hobby. It's not something, a fashion statement. It's not something to rebel against your parents with. It's really not even a religion. It's a lifestyle. It is something that appeals to you, and you feel comfortable following the tenets of whichever path you want to follow. That's, it becomes part of you, to where after a while, after you've done it enough, every breath you take is part of you being a pagan. It's, if you want to be some goofy little New Ager, D&D LARPer, Harry Potter, knockoff, fine. Take your D&D books and your spice rack that you think is all you need, and just go away. Leave us alone. You cause us a bad name, and people don't take us seriously for that reason. Like I said, that's nice. Pat you on the head. Go away. And as far as I think that pretty much covers this part one. In that, the next part I want to get into some of the multiple paths. Paganism is an umbrella term. It covers a bunch of different paths, pantheons, religions. So I'm going to cover a few of those so you get some idea of things. When you're starting out, like I said, however, here's probably the best advice I could give you. Learn everything that you can from every source that you can. Take the stuff that rings true for you and use it. The rest of it, don't discard it. Remember it, because there's a reason why it didn't appeal to you. You need to be able to articulate that reason, because somewhere down the line, you're going to be able to help somebody else along the way. You can say, well, this didn't work for me for this reason, but it might work for you. And after you've learned everything that you think you can learn, then comes the real interesting part. You get to unlearn it and then relearn it. And continue that process for the rest of your life. There is no ultimate end that you can reach and say, hey, I'm there. No, it's a perpetual road that goes into the future. It goes beyond your mortal life here. It's, just, you got to be prepared for that. Also, if you ever think that you're doing it right, I have learned that the more positive you are that you are right, the more likely you're wrong. So always have a little bit of doubt about what you're doing. Always be ready to change your opinions should it be necessary. And with that word, the prattle of those words of wisdom, I will end this part one, and we will get to part two, where I'll talk about some of the paths that you might consider along the way. So let me go and turn this off and then turn it back on, just like when they're doing commercials. They don't sit there while the commercial's going. They're taping the darn thing 5 seconds later. So I'm going to do the same thing. All right. Bye-bye, and then hi-hi. And I'm back. Okay, when it comes to paganism, it seems like everything tends to default to Wicca. Everything seems to start with Wicca. And that's fine. It's got a lot of PR, but it's not the only thing. And it's not witchcraft. It's Wicca. There's a difference between witchcraft and Wicca. Witchcraft is actually not even it's not a specific path. These people are herbalists, midwives, the healers of the community. That have been doing this since time began. Wicca is different, even though it covers many of the same components. It has been formalized into a religion, we'll say. So there's specific rituals and stuff. It varies from group to group, but that's the basic thing right there. Most Wiccans are in covens with a leader. Not always. They can be as solitary as anybody else. Same as with the witches. The witches are, they're in many cases solitaries. And again, it's not a religion for them. It's their calling. It's their craft. It's a vocation. And, so if somebody, if you're not a witch and you're not a Wiccan, well, that's cool. That's some of the other things we're going to cover. We'll get on to the one that I guess I could say I know the most about, and that is Druidry. That's because I'm a Druid, and I am, well, that's what I do. That's what I am. And probably the easiest way to define Druidry would be to say it's having a respect and a reverence for the land. Doing things that don't cause harm to the environment. It could be as simple as picking up a piece of litter. That could be considered Druidry. So you don't have to go through all the rigmarole. You just have like I said, a respect and a reverence for the earth, and you want to see it cared for, and you're, in whatever way is open to you, you are helping that along. There's several organizations that you could become a part of. The two largest, I should say that there's many solitary druids that have created their own little groups, and well, you find them where you find them. The two largest organizations, the one is based in England, Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, otherwise known as OBOD. And in many ways, it could be said that's where the modern Druidism began. The other large organization, which I have been associated with personally, I'm not even going to try to do the Gaelic. It's the ADF, which translates to a Druid Fellowship. It's for me personally, it's a good fit. I like it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be involved in it. And but either one of the organizations can work out quite well on that point. Another, That's the two biggest. We'll leave it at that right there. You can look them up online and you make a decision of your own on that. Some other related to Druidism would be any of the Native American paths, because in many ways they had a respect for nature that us white folks lack. And they have retained it. It's part of their culture. I would caution you in that if you were going to get involved in anything with Native Americans, you need to go to them. Specifically, if you're talking about following you need to go and find their medicine men and convince them that you want to learn from them. If you can do that, because the one thing you don't want to do is cultural appropriation. Just don't run off and start doing all of putting on feathers and dancing around fires and going woo 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 and all that stuff. No, that's disrespectful. One thing that the pagan paths try to have is respect for each other, so that we coexist. We have somebody that we can learn from. Their experiences could be very useful. Yours could be very useful to somebody else. But you got to be respectful. So if you choose to be doing anything with the Native Americans, go to them. And don't be a bozo. Some of the other things. Another one would be shamanism. And that's almost always a solitary. The term shaman, or shaman, however you want to pronounce it, comes from the Mongolian, practitioners. Don't even bother going to them. It's real simple. For them, the shamanic path is hereditary. If you aren't, if you weren't born into it, they're not going to teach you. But there's many ways of doing shamanic things. The Native American medicine men are very similar to that. There are people out there that have just been working on their own, and they could still have very useful information. So don't disregard that. Let me think, what else? And of course, there's multiple paths. There's such as those that might be interested in the northern pantheon, such as Thor, Odin, and that. Asatru is a good place to start. I will warn you that they tend to be plain-speaking and rather brusque people, that it might set you back a little bit. But they have a very high respect for honor. It's woven into what they're doing. I wouldn't discount them just because they are saying things that aren't sugar-coated. The biggest problem with Asatru and any of the northern paths is that you've got the racists and the white supremacists that are trying to co-opt it. Cultural appropriation again. They have no right to it. If somebody starts talking racist stuff, get away from them. They're not on the path. It's as simple as that. No matter what they think or how ardent they are, they're not on the path. There is no racism in Asatru or any of our paths, to be truthful on that. There are people out there that are following the Greek and the Egyptian gods, and those pantheons. There's many European paths that are coming back, now that they're not being picked on as much as before. Many are woven in with the cultures. You also have the Irish, or rather the Celtic pantheon. My heritage is Celtic, and that is what I pretty much follow. So I'm dealing mostly with the Celtic deities, but I won't get into that. That's for part 3, where I'm going to talk a little bit about the deities and magic. For the moment, I've prattled enough on this, giving you something. And a good place to go, the local pagan shop. It's a great place. It's a crossroads. You can network there. You can find out about things that are going on in the area. If there's not a pagan shop in your area, look online. You can find them there. Don't ever be discouraged. Don't let anything stop you from what you want to do. And that's it. On to part 3. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, on to part 3 here. Basically, this is a quick talk about deities and magic. I'll start out with talking about magic. It's probably one of the most misunderstood things concerning paganism, in that, too many people think in terms of D&D, Harry Potter, and all that crap. Nice little fantasies and stories and stuff, but that is not magic. Not in the way that many of us view it. The term magic comes from an earlier Indo-European root word, magush, and it basically means to be able to do something through knowledge. And on that point, its Siamese twin is science. Believe it or not, science and magic are the same thing. I like to put it into the category of, well, I'll give you an example real quick. That example is, I'll talk about it in what I call Harry Potter terms, and then I'll talk about it in more mundane terms, and you'll be able to see the difference. Now, when it comes to doing things through knowledge, one of the things that I can do is that I can raise heavy objects into the air with just the wave of my hand. I also have lightning at my command. I can also make iron burn and flow like water. Now, if somebody was to make a claim like that to you, you'd wonder, okay, where's the butterfly net? This one's got to be put away somewhere. He's goofy. However, that's the Harry Potter terms. Now we'll take it from the more mundane terms. These are things that I did on my job almost on a daily basis. The first one, as far as lifting heavy objects with the wave of my hand, that's when I'm signaling a crane to move something. As far as lightning at my fingertips, yeah, every time I arc welded. As far as making iron burn and flow like water, that's when I'm using a cutting torch. It melts the iron and it causes it to burn. Now, you might say, well, that's not magic. Yes, it is. The main difference between science and magic, I like to think in terms of, is if you see the nuts and bolts of the process, it's science. If you don't see the nuts and bolts of the process and something happens like magic, well, guess what? It's magic. But in either case, it could be the exact same thing, such as what I was just talking about. There are many other things that can play a factor. The main thing with magic is that you are patterning your mind. You're setting your mind. You have a mindset that you're putting in place so that you are in the proper state to do what you want to do. And once your mind is set for it, things will happen much more naturally. You know, how, that depends person to person, it varies. But that's what I personally have found. If this kind of takes the fun out of it, we're hoping to, do something Harry Potter-ish. Well, I'm sorry. I guess I'll have to disappoint you there. Now, we'll get on to deities. There's a problem with deities in that because Christianity has been so pervasive for so long, too much of their context for a deity has bled over into paganism. Because they've got the infinite big dude. And of course, well, our gods have got to be really, huge too, which is not the case. The earlier context for a deity was to be greater than a human. If somebody is doing something that is impossible, or at the very least highly difficult to do for a normal person, that person has been at least touched by divinity. If they're not a deity unto themselves, then by damn, they've been touched by one. Many of the leaders of the past became gods, or considered as gods, usually after their death, where they have ascended to wherever they're going to. But you don't have to take it from that point of view. You can't. For this, my favorite deity to talk about is Thor, god of lightning, thunder, weather. He had the hammer Mjolnir that nobody else could pick up because it was just so massive. Nice little tale, and you can, I'm sure if you've read Marvel comics, you've got enough of the details, at least what they've done. However, there is a possibility that this could be something that happens in reality. The best example that I can give, like I said, is Thor. Now, because I'm in a living history group and we do the Middle Ages, I have the advantage of knowing that a little bit of information about weapons. Unlike what you see in the movies, the average sword that would be used on the battlefield weighs in at about 2-3 pounds. Maybe it goes up to 5 pounds. The really monstrous big blades like the Scottish Claymore or the Swiss Flamberge, these things topped out at 15 pounds. So, and it's like, is that all it is? Well, first off, try swinging 15 pounds worth of steel around and you'll find out it ain't as easy as you think. There are special muscle-bound people that would wield these weapons because they were the only ones that could do it effectively. Also, something that people today don't realize is when steel hits steel, be it, the weapon hits the armor or weapon hits weapon, sparks fly. It's just, I ain't going to go into the details of it. It's just that it happens. And of course, when a weapon hits a shield or armor, the sound, believe me, is thunderous, especially if there's a bunch of you out there in the field. You're bang crashing around, it gets noisy out there. So, we have the beginnings of a context for Thor, where there's a thunderous sound when he's hitting, sparks are flying, which could be considered lightning, and he's got a big, heavy weapon that only he can pick up. The problem is that even at 15 pounds, you're not talking about something over the top, because a person can, if they're strong enough, do it. But let's just say that the weapon, instead of being 15 pounds, weighed in at 100 pounds. Now you've got something that the average person is not going to be able to pick up and use. Mjolnir. Now all we need is an example of something that happened in the past, documented. And lo and behold, we've got one. In the northern kingdoms of China, there was a warrior who had a battle axe that weighed 100 pounds. He called it the hill chopping blade. And believe me, something like that, yeah, I think you could cut down a hill with it. Needless to say, if he hit somebody with it, they were through. Done deal. So if you've got one, this Chinese warrior, oh, by the way, he ended up in one of the reasons why it was documented is that there was a guy on the other side in one battle that had an equally large weapon, and the two of them as champions went at it on the battlefield. And it was, like I said, it was notable enough that, and of course at that point it starts to get spooky when you're talking about weapons that are that large and that lethal. You can put it in the category of saying, oh yeah, I think we got somebody here. If he's not a deity, he's pretty damn close, so we're calling it as it is. This also puts, it also puts Hercules, who was half a god, a demigod, into the realm of possibility too. So don't disregard them. Also, when you're talking about the deities, again, there's usually magic or a magical weapon. We've already talked about Mjolnir, so let's get to magic again. Something that is attributed to them specifically. And it varies from deity to deity. They've all got their attributes in that. But the one thing that I like to cite is somebody that's not a deity, but he did use magic to save somebody's life. The magic was he took a couple of steps and sat down. Now, that might not sound like magic, but again, remember, magic, doing something through knowledge. The person in question is the Islamic prophet Muhammad. He's sitting on the side of the road, and this guy comes running along all worried and he inquires with him what's going on. And the guy says, well, there's a band of, people after me, and if they catch me, they're going to kill me. And Muhammad told him, said, well, just continue on down the road. I've got this. At which point the guy continues running down the road. Muhammad gets up, takes a few steps, and sits back down. A little while later, this band of people comes by, and they ask Muhammad if he's seen this person. What Muhammad said was, no one has passed by here since I've been sitting. They know him to be an honorable man, so they knew he wasn't lying, and he wasn't. So they headed off in another direction. It saved the man's life. There are multiple cases of this. Some great, some small. That's one I like. It's an amusing little one, and it puts magic into the category of where it should be. Not Harry Potter, not D&D, and the rest of it. And so take a look at these. Take a look at a deity that you're interested in, seeing what their attributes are, and then you start to get an idea of what they're about. And this could be very, very important in some cases. Some of the deities you want to be a little careful with. They are subtle, and they are, in some cases, sneaky, and you probably want to approach them respectfully. They've been around longer than you. They know more than you. You know, if you think you got the goods, they're going to ruin your day, or at least get your attention, we'll say. I could go on about that for hours, but we won't. And, well, I think that covers the basics. If there's anything that, I haven't covered that you think should have, and you have a question, certainly you can contact me. I'll do my best to answer it. And that's, I think that's it. So I will get out of the way and let the next teacher come on and talk to you. You all have a good day and a good night, and certainly I wish you the best on your path as you start it. Bye-bye.